That which obscures the real self is the personal created self, and the extent to which the real you is obscured is the level of density of the personal self that we focus on and remain immersed with. The personal self is multi-layered, and most will only consider that they are the physical level body, and with perhaps a little consideration of the astral as the place they go to next. Part of the trap of the controlled matrix is to limit awareness to as little of the created self as possible, and this has certainly been achieved. What we consider has an overbearing on our experience, and despite having all these multi-levels to the created self, if our considerations incorporate only a fraction of the creation, then we can only experience a fraction of the simulation, a fraction of ourselves in essence. The created personal self is described and laid out as having 5 levels, with the 5 corresponding life levels of the simulation. But in actuality, everything is an isness. Although the is that which the created simulation is not, and although there is seeming separation between the two, that the simulator is a reflection, etc., all creational simulators are a part of the is. They would have to be, by virtue of the fact that the creation of the simulations is by the design of the is, and the created personal vehicles that reside within are moulded by the overseeing eye of the real selves that stand with the is, but have at this time the inability to recognize themselves, or the is they are a part of. This must be the case, or the real selves would not be constantly recreating physical vehicles for a simulator. For again, the purpose of the simulator is to generate experience, and through the experience, the real self can recognize itself from the perspective of a created self, by comparing what it really is and what the true reality is to what it is not, and that's everything in the simulator. As our awareness has become detached and disconnected from the real selves, the awareness that is in the creations will understandably think the creation is what it is. The trap of the matrix can then be sprung, because at one time, even though there were the simulators, as there ever are, the connection to the real self and the is was maintained. Consequently, it was far easier to navigate through the mire of the psych realms, through the personal self effectively, as the real self, still unable to recognize itself, would at least be directly motivating the personal self. The motivation nothing other than self-recognition, and so one might imagine the process of becoming more aware would be rather a fast-track thing. A disconnect from the real self, and the personal self will become rather lost in the matrix, and perhaps remain there forever, with the real self doing its best to nudge the personal self along. The issue, of course, being the extent of the disconnect. With a connection to the real self, it would be far easier to be objective to the personal self. One would have a greater sense of the two beings that they seem to be, and the difference between the two. The differences and the objective comparisons, the alternating between the two selves, would be an essential part of ultimately recognizing the true reality that the real self is in, that the real self is. The real universes of the is are invisible to the personal self, regardless of where the awareness is, within the construction and layers of its creation. And so, the only way the real universes can be recognized is through the means of comparison that the simulators and the experiences generated within them can provide. Naturally, if an individual had moved to the deepest parts of itself, the inward journey, through the layers of emotion and mind, and into the ethereal part of itself, this is the most favourable position, and the closest to its real self, as here nothing but a deep dark border, a kind of eggshell, separates the recognition of itself. Most people, of course, will be locked through their own choice to the densest parts of their created selves, the emotional, mental aspects, and with a lean mostly toward the sensation body, that is the astral, emotional part. What is considered, what is decided, will very much limit experience in accordance. The experience, the effect and extension of whatever we are constantly deciding. Most of the considerations of self, most of the beliefs, hopes and faith are very religious in their restricting origins, and with such considerations very much ingrained in the created consciousness, this will ensure the experience will be just as limiting. As all religious and spiritual ideas are affiliated with the gods of man, and the life levels they reside on, they are tap-lining mechanisms, and ensure the awareness cannot experience further than the astral, mental parts of itself. The influence will also be instrumental in keeping individuals contained to the denser aspects of their creation, but its presence will not extend beyond the mental life level, where she assumes the position as the third head of the three-headed Callum god. All of the belief systems have been established for this reason, as a control mechanism to lock individuals into the most limited positions possible, that they have the least chance of connecting with the real universes of the ears. The marketing ploy of the controllers embroil and tantalize the individual into a one-dimensional consideration also, that being a consideration of nothing more than the physical, literal level self. The trick here is to create constant phenomena, distractions and the like, which keep the individual engaged, to keep them chasing the creations of others on the physical level, that they don't begin to explore the deeper aspects of their created selves. The emotional, astral part of the created self is the easiest to snare, as it is the part of the individual that is by far the most utilized. The individual predominantly will chase thrills and seek to forever satiate the sensation body, to want every sensation there is, and to perpetually be chasing something else that may provide the next thrill. The controllers, of course, know this, and so they devise a structured world in which every sensation possible is available, and they market the necessity to overstimulate the astral vehicle, producing a world that is based on sexual gratification. It's not that anything is necessarily bad, as everything is experience, and we decide the manner of the experiences, but the marketing as it pertains to the astral sensation body is blown out of proportion to the point of absurdity. We are bombarded with such imagery at every turn. Everything is sexualized and gradually becomes more perverse. The emotional body can become desensitized to what may have readily stimulated it generations ago, for thrills are generally at their most potent if it is something that has not been experienced before, or seldomly so, and so the thrills required to induce the same degree of sensation have to be ramped up, and the controllers are more than happy to oblige. The unquenchable want to have emotional experience tends to compound. It's not entirely unexpected that at the end of an epoch cycle, at the Iron Age in which we stand, that there is great distortion as it pertains to sexual gratification, extreme and abusive versions of it, that incorporate violence, and an encouraged gender-switching society, in which apparently 100 identities of gender are now available. A veritable feast of experience for the overstimulated astral emotional self, and very much encouraged and orchestrated by the controllers, hence it all having such widespread media exposure and acceptability. Thousands of children pre-pubescent age are readily switching genders with gender-blocking serums, and in many situations the parents' consent isn't even required. There was always the occasional case of an individual desiring a gender change, probably due to a very strong identity as the opposite gender, and probably because of being that very opposite gender in the life previously lived. But the extent to which it is prevalent now must have alarm bells ringing, as nothing features in the human experience if it is not by the design of the world controllers, as part of their ongoing control and creational restricting machinations. And then, as is always the case, the controllers must seek and secure agreement through their various ingenious subconscious and marketed means. As it must always be so, that nothing can be experienced overall unless the experiencers, the individuals, overall agree with it, in keeping with the cause and effect principle by which the simulator is based. And so all of this will have the individual locked into a physical astral consideration. If that is the only parts of the self that are focused on, decided from, and utilized, then the experience will be limited to these areas of the self. The individual will not be able to access readily deeper parts of itself, beyond the created consciousness of the mind and emotions. Wherever an individual predominantly focuses and stands with themselves, will block off the other parts of their creation. They will be unable to access the full extent of the personal self, and the life levels affiliated with them all. Everything is an isness, and so the full extent of the personal self, and indeed the real awareness encased within the sheaths of the layers of the creation, are all present in every new moment. Everything is about awareness, the awareness of the self, and the real universe is. The extent to which awareness can move freely throughout the personal creation's 5 aspects depends upon the extent to which the individual limits themselves, or allows themselves to be so. For most who are physical astral, this is all they will ever see. It's like they can't see beyond the barrier of the 2 densest aspects of themselves. And even though they have 5 vehicles and 5 life levels, they are walking around in a kind of enclosed bubble within the full extent of their personal selves, a bubble which incorporates the physical and astral only. This would result in the stifling of intuition and imagination on the physical level, the facilities of the ethereal part of the self, beyond the created consciousness of the mind and emotions.